Do you know how powerful you are?
Welcome to Rise Urban Nation.
Welcome everybody to Rise Urban Nation.
Reshaping and elevating your mindset to help you achieve what you believe.
Sometimes we don't even see our own greatness. You can't be what you can't see.
And connecting Black cultures to build a community of talent and success.
Black people need to realize that they are assets. You are an asset.
When we rise, you rise.
Come together as a group.
This is Rise Urban Nation with Terrell Simmons.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Risepreneurs. Your host with the most, Terrell Simmons. Welcome and thank you for spending some more time with me. I appreciate all the love. Got to give a shout out to all our listeners over in Nigeria. Saw a wave of y'all listening to the podcast over this past week. Thank you for your love, your support, and everything that my Nigerians got going on out there. Hope to make it out there someday. Have some fun in the sun with you. Anyhow, this next guest that I got coming on, Daniel. I like to say dream with Daniel because I think that's his part of his whole persona and everything that he has going on in his brand. But it was such a pleasure to connect with him when I got a chance to connect with him. Talk about a brother with big dreams, great aspirations, and just great energy and aura to him. That's him in a nutshell. And got the chance to sit with him and go through his new travels as he's over here in not too far from us in Mexico right now, all the way from the UK, and talked about his journey and his wave of success. So without further ado, I don't want to spoil it because there's so many things I want to say about it, but I was like, nah, I don't want to spoil it. Let's get into the interview. Here's Daniel, ladies and gentlemen. Get some good nuggets. How did you come up with that name, Dream with Dan?
So actually, my whole catchphrase is "Dream with your eyes open." That's my catchphrase. That's my tagline.
Okay.
All my social media handles are Dreamer CEO. So initially, I had a bit of a bitter-driven moniker, which was Prince of the Boardroom.
Yeah.
So I was like, it was like a mix between Machiavelli's The Prince and The Count of Monte Cristo, and that was like yeah, I'm going to get back at the world for like I'm going to make it happen. And I was like, yeah, that's not really a great direction of energy. And so what would my dream be? And then I started musing on the fact that dreams don't really mean anything unless we do something active about it. And that's when Dream with Your Eyes Open came in. And then as I went down the rabbit hole with it, I was like, oh, there's so many different applications of this idea of dreaming with your eyes open. And then the whole lucid living thing came in, and yeah, and then it just became, then dreamwithdan.com became available. I was like, oh, I better get that.
Yeah. While I'm dreaming of this, I better secure that if I have to pay a pretty price for it.
That URL, or somebody tries to make me pay a silly price for it. So,
So what's the whole concept of your business and the structure of it and how you do the magic sauce to what you do?
You know what? The magic sauce really comes down to two things. One is a concept that I developed called the flow funnel.
Okay.
And the other one is my beyond intention paradigm. So the flow funnel basically invites us to look at the reality of how reality is laid out, in so much as that we're not just physical bodies. We also have a mind which can have an impact on physical matter. Our thoughts change the neural pathways in the brain, the chemistry in the body, the hormones that are being released. That affects our behavior, the choices that we can make, and therefore by the law of cause and effect, the outcomes that we get. So we get that, and then even the law recognizes the idea of crimes of passion. So our emotional state can have an impact on how we think. So we've got these three very distinct areas of expression and experience, one which is a slave to the other.
Yeah.
And so I actually laid this out diagrammatically and said, well, if we have a thought, an idea, an intention, or a goal, an objective at the top, the first thing that needs to happen in order for that to make its way to us is there has to be a resonance in our emotional field. The emotion has to begin that cascade of leading down to the behavior of actually getting to what we want. And if I say I want to have health, for example, but my emotional resonance doesn't match that as someone that's going to eventually go into behaviors and take actions that lead to health, it's not going to happen, or it's going to be very, very challenging. If I say I want to create financial abundance, which is the main area that I've focused on in terms of using my work, because people listen when you say you're going to make them a millionaire. Yeah. It's like, hey, I'll help you make money. Like I was, because before it's like, I want you to create your own reality. I want you to be in dominion of your experience. I don't want you to be a victim to fate. I want you to be the captain of your ship. That's great. Okay, I'm going to teach you how to use these concepts to make loads of money. Sign me up. It's like, now that you're here, can we talk about how you're not going to be able to get that unless you can do this? And then people's lives change. But yeah, even with financial abundance, you know, if I say to you, you know, if I say to myself, I'm going to be financially abundant, but then I've got trauma around the idea of holding money. I've got emotional experiences, or like my energy around money is funky. Then my thought processes are going to match that. They're going to be funky. Then my behavior is going to be funky. I'm going to self-sabotage. I'm going to procrastinate. I'm not going to go and get the bag. And so all of that needs to be in flow, and that's what the flow funnel is. So that's the first piece of magic sauce.
You speak of my language right now. You speak of my language, because we were just having a conversation, because I do a radio show too out here in San Diego, California, where I talk to all things encompassing, you know, our communities, Black and brown communities. This podcast is strictly for the Black community, because mindset is where I start too with a lot of this work. We have, at least here in the US, and then what I'm finding around the world, there's a concepts or culture of limiting beliefs in our Black communities. And it all starts in our mindset, where these different ideas or vision, or how we look at money, how we look at health, how we look at wealth, that start and we hold on to. And these are often limiting beliefs that were either fed to us, whether it be systematically, or that were handed down to generation to generation. And we have to unbreak that cycle before we can get to a new vision of what that could be. And I've met so many amazing, you know, Blacks and Africans around the world in my entrepreneurial journey that are just doing amazing things. And when I go back and try to speak to students about this, or the speaking gigs that I normally get, there's always a group that has this limiting belief that, oh, well, that person was successful, that's not for me, because there can only be one in that field, and that person's already taken that slot. Or, you know, that may have been true for this person or that person, but there's just all these different concepts. So I love that you're starting with that. And so this podcast is kind of just to highlight all of, you know, the people like yourself doing just brilliant things in your space, and it's to show us that it's more than just one of us out here doing it, and that we can all do it, and we find that special gift and unique talent that we have, and make that thought into a reality.
But that has to take some action, and sometimes that action that's demanded of us is going and get some healing, for example.
Yes.
Sometimes it's maybe creating some space from disempowering aspects of our environment that are holding us captive to the limiting beliefs that we're holding.
Speak on.
Sometimes. Let's speak to that. I mean, I've had an interesting. First and foremost, I live in Mexico now. I actually live in Cabo, so I'm just south of you.
You're in Mexico now? Get out of here.
I live in Cabo, yeah.
Because I'm assuming you're from the UK.
I'm from East London. Yeah,
okay.
East London. Yeah.
So now you in Cabo. That's a whole paradigm shift right there.
Oh, yeah. So, first and foremost, there are not many Black people running around Cabo speaking Spanish. So everybody knows me because I'm that guy. Hey, Daniel. It's like, hey, ¿cómo estás, caballero? But like, it wasn't the reason why I am here, but I literally uprooted and I'm in a completely different environment. This gives me a completely new slate. Now, you don't necessarily even need to make such a massive physical shift. I know a friend of mine, Caplice, actually had him on my podcast, and like me, you know, he'd been to jail and stuff like that, and had to rebuild himself. And for him, he was like, he just changed how he dressed, you know, and he was doing his numbers in his previous entrepreneurial journey, which wasn't a mainstream entrepreneurial journey, so to speak, right? And he came out, and I met him a few months after he sort of came out and was getting himself back together. And he's like started wearing a bow tie, started just mixing it up, having conversations with different people, even using the internet in order to do that, and just flipped everything in his immediate environment. Now he's doing numbers in car sales. He's taken his previous skills, reapplied them to a completely new, and he's doing silly numbers, silly numbers, not looking over his shoulder, right? And the reason why I'm telling this story is because he had a drastic change in his whole life experience without necessarily needing a drastic change in his experience.
Yeah.
When I look at friends of mine, for example, who have followed my path and have gone, just decided to make a big leap, that big leap facilitated, I'm getting to my point now, having an environment that allowed us to make new choices. Because when we're in an environment, our environment is re-imprinting the same neural pathways, the same triggers, the same thought patterns, therefore the same behaviors, therefore the same experiences. And it's easier, I'm not going to say it's impossible to do it without doing so, but it's much easier when you have a change to facilitate you creating a change.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I love all that. You know, let me get, first of all, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of RiseUrbanNation. We just got direct into conversation. This brother right here is just brilliant. And I know this is going to be a great episode. My engineer's going to have a one hell of a time chopping this up. Because I didn't do the normal introduction segue and all that good stuff. Because we just got deep into conversation. And I resonate with everything you said, because the transformation, the first part of my journey of transformation for me was moving, because I grew up in Washington, D.C., when it was murder capital, in the hoods and the ghettos, have you. And there was a certain mindset that's there. And it wasn't until I moved completely out of that, everything I knew changed course of living in here in San Diego, California, which brought me culture shock. Had to do a whole new shift of how I saw the world, learned the new culture and everything that started me down this path. And I'm always still forever learning as I've grown in different careers and so forth. So I resonate with everything you're saying. Now let's go back, because I want people to understand your journey to how you got here too. And before we get tips and tricks of how you got to where you're at today. And I always usually like to start like way early, like before you even got into this career. And I do this because sometimes I go speaking to kids, or even like just people who are in dead end jobs, right? Who's like, I need to change something in life, but they know that mentally, but they haven't physically done anything to do that shift. I like to show them like where somebody's early beginnings were. So could you tell me, just humor me with this one question. What was your first job?
I've actually only had 2 jobs in my life.
Okay.
The first I didn't need. I taught myself to make computers when I was 13 years old. And so I was actually making and selling computers online. But one summer when I was 15, a friend of mine, Andrew, was like, hey, what are you doing this summer? I was like, I'm just chilling. He's like, well, I got a job working at Stir Century Cinema. I was just in town. I was like, oh, that's cool. He goes, yeah, it'd be cool for you to come and hang out. Like, we can hang out more if you come and work here. We're like, it'll be cool. Like, we get to watch movies first and just get some extra money. You're not doing anything. I said, all right, cool. So I went, hung out with him. My 2 best friends I've had in the world since then, Jamie and Nathan, I met at the same time. We've been friends now for more than 20 years. And yeah, I was making popcorn and selling Ben and Jerry's ice cream and getting to watch movies and just having a good time. So that was my first job. My first real job was in a job that I actually needed. It's like, okay, I actually need a job now. I was 28. I was rebuilding, and I worked in a call center while I was building up my consulting business. So I worked on my business whatever time I got up in the morning, up until like 11:30. Then I'd hit the gym. Then I'd work at the call center doing the same customer service call for 7 minutes over and over again from 1:30 till 9:30 with a 45-minute lunch break and 2 15-minute breaks, answering emails under the table with my BlackBerry and running out every 5 minutes to go and do calls. And I did that and that was for minimum wage. You know, it wasn't like, it was dead end. And I did that. I went to go and live in my £80 a week house share bed sit, which was basically, I was tenant of a slumlord. And I did that until my little consulting business was making just a couple £100 a week, just so that I could afford to pay my rent and put pasta and tuna in my belly. And I'm talking about like the 20 pence tuna and 30 pence pasta with onion, garlic, and a little hot sauce just to take the edge off, and a bowl of porridge in the morning. That was what I was just like, tuna pasta twice a day, porridge in the morning, gym, maybe a protein bar if I had a little bit of extra that week. And I did that. So I ended up working at that call center for about 6 months or something like that while I built up. And then within a year, the business was doing 5 figures a month. And then within a year of that, we're doing 5 figures a week. And then within about 2.5 years, I was doing 6 figures.
Nice.
6 figures a month.
Nice.
So yeah, that was the like a job that I actually I needed it to cover the basis and get that pillar, those needs taken care of. And I was blessed I was able to find something that started in the afternoon so I could get ahead of the day in the morning and then and build up my business.
Yeah, so now let's jump back into it because that's an amazing story and it took some sacrifice and it took some realization from a mindset and the vision that you had at some point of this is not where you needed to be, this is not where you wanted to be, and to put that into action. So somebody who's listening to this podcast and they're inspired and encouraged by your story, what would you say were the steps that you took to transition your career into that successful business, six-figure business that you speak of?
Relationships,
okay.
Yeah. One of my mentors, and I'm a firm believer in mentors, one of my mentors actually is near you. Greg Reed's one of my mentors. He's up in San Diego, up in Carlsbad. Now I'm firmly in the mentor. I mean, I spent $172,000 on my personal development last year. I'm very, very, very big on investment in that. And some of it's paid, some of it's just, again, relationships that are developed. And one of those is with a very, very wealthy guy, black guy as well. He's in steam coal mining. He's also in oil and renewable energy as well. Put it this way. He's got accounts that have got like 9 figures sitting in them doing nothing. Right. He sold 49% of one of his companies a few years ago for 800 million. Right. That's the levels that he's playing at. So he was in London. I went to go and hang out with him and just sort of, get some counsel from him because I was having some challenges with that particular business that I built up. And he told me his story, which I hadn't known as much about his story because as long as I'd known him, he'd always been doing it. And he said, he first had his start with the timber mill that he had in West Africa in Liberia. But of course, then we had the civil war in Liberia. He had to get out really quick and just basically leave everything. So one day he's there doing his numbers, living life, shipping his timber all over the world, enjoying champagne and whatnot. Next, the rebels have taken over and he's just like, wow, I need to just like get my passport and get out. And he ended up on a woman's sofa. And he said like a year later, he was a millionaire again.
Wow.
I said, what? He goes, yes, Dan, because of relationships. Never, ever underestimate the power of relationships. So I heard that story after I'd already had my start, my restart. But I understood why my restart actually worked at that time because the one resource I was able to start marketing and then building up trust with clients on was based on a relationship that I'd had that had actually helped me make my first million years before. So it's a relationship that I'd had cultivated and nurtured. And even after I'd failed so miserably, because I had really nurtured that relationship, even as I was going through my reconstruction and not knowing what I'm doing, I was able to reach out to him because he maintained contact with me and would still send me words of encouragement. And I was like, I'm ready to get back into it. Can I send clients your way? Can we work on some deals together? And he said, I've been waiting for you to say that. Let me know what you need. Anything you need, I'm going to help you. Right? And that's what gave me my start.
Yeah, relationships and mentorship, definitely two big components. Now, I feel like his story kind of mimics your story in a way, how you just uprooted and came to Mexico. Are you doing this on purpose? Is this
Maybe.
So speak of the mindset it takes to do that. What do you have to do to get into action from thought to action? When you're looking at restarting like this, all anew, what has to go into place? What exercises, routines, what have you?
I've been shaken up a couple of times. I mean, I've made and lost 2 multi-million-pound fortunes by the age of 24. So I wasn't a stranger to having that clean board start because it had been thrusted upon me. And actually, this gave me the opportunity to have gratitude for those experiences because it gave me the experience to be able to just start with that clean slate. But there's an interesting point that I just want to put forward that I think is coming forward that may have some relevance here. I didn't need to work in a minimum wage job. And I'll explain that. I'm from the UK, which is very much a welfare state. Because I literally was on my face, I could have got housing benefits. So the £80 a week for that, I could have got, the government would have paid for it for me. I could have got another, I think it's £70 £100 a week or £80 a week. I can't remember how much it was from the government to put food in the house and other benefits. I could have actually skated by, even scaled down and skated by with the government paying for my life while I build my business up. I could have done that. But that wasn't the behavior of someone who's moving forward. Do you get where I'm coming from? So the choices that we're making, the actions that we're taking have to align with the version of ourselves that we say that we're moving into, because the choices that we're making now are dictating the path that we're going to go down, and they're going to say which person we're going to step into, what we're going to embody. And so I just want to put it out there that there are people who perhaps are looking at their experience and they're saying, oh, only that person can do it. Only this person can do it. Oh, only this, only that. But actually, the reality that's unfolding for you is unfolding from these choices that you're making now about who you can and cannot be, about what you can and cannot do. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we all are faced with choices and decisions that will evolve into our experience. And ultimately, our memories from the past and our reflection on the experiences that we had before is going to contribute to the capacity that we have to make choices here and now. But it's by consciously stepping up and committing fully. Because, a lot of people say that they want it, but they don't want it. They don't really want it, T. They say they want it, but they don't. Because simple things such as that time that you're spending watching Netflix in the evening, why are you not doing some research about this business that you claim that you want to have?
Yeah, that's true.
You care so much about getting in shape, but you can't wait till the weekend, wait till Saturday and have a little cheat day before you need to stuff yourself with ice cream. What matters more to you, getting in shape or having ice cream? And so I think there's also, having an honesty with ourselves about what we really want and whether or not we really want it, because a lot of people say they want it and they really don't.
And I definitely get that with the choices that we make. Now, I also think there's another side of the coin here that I'm going to speak to, and this is just kind of play devil's advocate.
Sure.
Where sometimes people let fear control them, right?
Oh, yeah,
and then we're humans, so we're emotional, we're human beings, and we have this thing called the unconscious bias, and which is based on our experiences, right?
Definitely.
In life. So like if I touch the stove and it's hot and it's burned me 2, 3, 4 times, or if I work with that person and somebody like this person has burned me or hurt me through 3 or 4 million times, or I've been through a system of whether it be education, government, and where I live, where it's never worked out for me systematically. So I don't trust the process of the system and to do business with that system. How do I then begin to unpack in a healthy way to, not grow victim to my circumstances of those things that impact my behavior?
I'd say this is where the second part of the secret sauce comes in. We dealt with the flow funnel, but the second part is my model, Beyond Intention. And what Beyond Intention does is it offers us the space to be deliberate in the choices that we make, and through the deliberate choices that we make, create a reality that we want. You see, someone that's so much of a slave to fear that they don't even see they're in fear, or don't even see that it's another option to fear, there's nothing we can do for them right now. And that sounds cold, especially as we're here saying, we want to impact the world and but we're not responsible for changing people. We're responsible to those who we are called to change, and to those who we call ourselves to change, to show up and do our bit. But we're not responsible for them, only to them through the responsibility we have for ourselves. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's deep right there.
Right. So, because everyone's got their journey, and it's not our job. And I think it's quite egotistical for people to say, all I can do is offer people the opportunity to change themselves. But if someone doesn't want to hear the voice of that opportunity, then, a big part of my journey has been letting go of I need to change. No, I get the message out there. I'm out here every day. I did 4 podcasts yesterday. I'm doing 4 or 5 podcasts today. I've got 3, and I've got a radio show. There's going to be a blog coming out today. I'm going to be doing content today. I'm out there. I'm running ads on Facebook, not to sell stuff, but to share the message with people. That's what I'm doing right now. Now, how that is received is not my responsibility. I'm responsible to people by doing my utmost to get the message out. Once people are on the receiving end of that, there are those who are so caught up in this story, they're not ready.
Yeah.
And that's where a big part of my work, the first part of the secret sauce, because Beyond Intention is 4 steps: accept, clear, gratitude, and listen. And that's why when I'm even sharing my work with people, I like to start at something that people cannot deny. And the thing that we can't deny is a very simple mathematical truth. If we've got 20 different experiences going on in our life, 20 relationships, 20 challenges, every single one of them has got different people, places and things involved with them. Maybe there'll be some common threads, little 6 degrees of the separation here and there. But there is only one common thread in every one of those experiences. I am the only common denominator in my entire experience. There is no one and nothing else that's in every experience in my life. Wherever you go, there you are. You get where I'm coming from?
I get where you're coming from.
And as much as we want to be justified even in blame, in pushing responsibility and passing the buck, as much as we may actually have justification, again, because you're calling me as a black man from the United States. Mm-hmm. You and I know very well the system wasn't created for black men in the United States. It's been demonstrated time and time again, even when you look at the construct of the Constitution, even when you look at the construct of the system, that it was made to favor white men. That's it. It's a fact. However, you don't have to stay in America, T. And people don't want to hear that. People don't want to hear that. You didn't have to stay in Washington, D.C. and be constricted to the situations and limitations of that. You went somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Now, it may not be the complete freedom and complete alignment with complete, expansiveness that's available to you as a black man, but it's a step up. And guess what? You may be at peace with the life that you've been able to create in that place. But there are people sitting in Washington, D.C. There are people sitting in the inner cities of London, the inner streets of London, and saying, "Oh, I've got no choice." You do have a choice. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a truth that people don't want to hear. And the reason why they don't want to hear it is because they are such a slave to what's going on. The fear has them gripped. But fear is a construct that we have to agree and subscribe to. As soon as we become an adult with the function of analysis, as soon as we become a grown-up with the function to make a choice, we're not a slave of someone else. We're a slave of our own making. And again, that's a truth that people don't want to hear.
Yeah. So true. So true.
They don't want to hear it. Let's look at, I remember when the Black Lives Matter thing really kicked off last year. I mean, kicked off.
Yeah.
And a lot of Anglo-Americans were quoting statistics that they should not have had the freaking right to quote. Our lives as black people were being reduced in their value, not even on the basis of white figures, but black on black figures. Mm-hmm. That's a joke. It's ridiculous that someone has the capacity to reduce the value of the lives of our brothers and sisters on the basis of the fact that they can give factual data to say that we're not valuing them. Mm-hmm. And then we want to blame the system.
Yeah. And that's something that I often have debates with individuals about, what would it look like if we as, black people take control of our own destiny, right? Mm-hmm. We invest in each other, not just here in the U.S., but all globally, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine if I connect with my brothers and sisters in the UK, Africa, and so forth, and we decide that we're going to circulate the black dollar all around the globe and invest in each other, buy with each other. Let's just say if we even took the continent of Africa itself and banded all the brothers together, and Africa was to come to an agreement with each other that we're going to have one currency for the whole continent. Do you know that Africa could probably be the most powerful continent with all its natural resources, with its diamonds, its oil, its gold? But somehow, whatever construct you believe in, whether it be colonialism or white supremacy, has disbanded us from working together to prevent that unity and keep us in this mental slavery.
Let's just look at the word Africa. Let's look at the word Africa. Okay. The word Africa comes from the Arabic word Afrika, which means to separate. When you look at the continent of Africa now, you have these lines, these colonial lines. The countries that we have are colonial lines. Look at what happened in Rwanda. Look at what happened in my parents' country, Zimbabwe, where they deliberately banded together warring tribes. And they said, here, you guys handle that. Look at what happened in Sudan, in South Sudan, where they're manipulating these lines for peoples that generally didn't understand the concept of owning the land. It's like owning the sky. We just do what we're doing. But here's the thing that we don't like to admit. It was black people that let them in the door in the first place. I'm sorry, but it was us that let them in the door in the first place. The greed of a few created the doorway. Even when we go back to the original conversation of fear, the original conversation of these limiting beliefs, they don't come from nowhere. They have to be invited in, supported, allowed, or there must be a failure to disrupt it. And I don't believe in a creator, a God, a divine source, like a spirit that is not expansive. That the one I believe is expansive. And we're always offered the opportunity. But the thing is that sometimes we're so caught up in our stories that we're not ready to open up to the possibility of the opportunity. And so when it presents itself, we go back to, oh, but I can't do that. The only way I'm getting out of this place is if I do music or I do sport, which is a narrative that's been leaking out globally. Yeah. Globally. What about being a scientist? What about being an entrepreneur? What about being an economic star instead of a trap star? But here's the crazy thing, T. It's us who are perpetuating the stories that that's the only thing available to us. Look at black represented media. I know some very wealthy, successful black people. And you know what? A lot of them haven't really got time for us. Not because of anything other than the fact that we're not really demonstrating that we're available to make time for. So there has to be a cultural systemic change. But much like the disempowering constrictive version came in through a few, I believe that a tipping point created by people that are ready to come up and say these hard truths, followed by people who are ready to hear them and to make new choices on the back of it, can create a quantum leap forward in a more expansive direction for black people everywhere.
I definitely agree with that. So I love your knowledge and your in-depth, and I'm afraid this interview might go a little bit longer than I anticipated. What would you say the greatest lesson life has taught you from your journey, from being able to go from a dead-end job, build a six-figure business, reconnect with some mentors, and drop all that, move over to a new country and restart back up because of through this journey of life? What would you say is one good lesson that life has taught you?
I'd say that a good lesson that life has taught me, really, would be that I'm human and I'm not going to be switched on all the time. I'm not going to be switched on all the time. I'm not going to get it right every time. And to give myself grace in the face of that truth. Not grace to the point of like letting myself off the hook. I'm not talking about, oh, well, guess I fudged up again. La, da, 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 da. That's not what I'm talking about. Because I've done that one too. I've done that one, right? But just, you're human, D. Maybe you need to sleep a bit longer this morning and take care of shit after 9 o'clock. Maybe you need to just put down close the computer and go for a walk. I've recently gone into that mode too. And I think last year was a big part of it. 2020. I'm not sure if 2020 for you has done the same thing. It's made me slow down as a person, pause and reflect on the things that are really important and really weigh in on self-care with everything that we were seeing going on in the world. Because I think that's one thing that also is lacking in our communities, that ability for self-care and pause and reflection. And as you just mentioned and alluded to, grace. And you know what? I think a thing of that is being ready to be vulnerable. Ooh. Because here's the thing. You spoke about how our experiences lead to like the way that we have this negative bias. We have a negative bias about vulnerability because those who are not strong haven't survived. But I think, in fact, it's the opposite. Those who are vulnerable are the strongest. But we've not been given that. Hence, we have the narratives around vulnerability don't speak to its strength. They speak to its weakness. If I just said the word vulnerable, if you hadn't had any learning of your own, and I said vulnerable, you automatically think of weak spots. Our shields are vulnerable. Our defenses are vulnerable. Whereas the vulnerability that we invite as a strength, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, we get it mixed up with the physical vulnerability to imminent threat and the availability then to harm or danger through those openings in our defenses. And we've got this connotation around it. So no, I can't put my guard down. I can't deal with that person just openly and honestly. I got to watch him out. And then a few bad apples spoil the cart, because then you get those people that do take advantage of vulnerability. So true, so true. So what's some advice you would give to someone who like to start a career in your industry, get into entrepreneurship, consulting and so forth? What was some advice you would give them? Don't overcomplicate it. So for me, I focused on one product. First, it was trade finance. And I didn't go for big deals straight away. I was just looking for little deals where I make £100 here, £200 there, just my little half a point, quarter of a point commission, just to build that book and to build those relationships. And I built that up until, guess what? Relationships through successfully completed trade finance transactions opened up the door to relationships that made other services available to me. And those other services enabled me to solve new problems. And as I solved new problems, I had new opportunities for income. And as I solved those, I had new relationships that gave me new opportunities to solve different problems. Until I've done government level problem solving that paid very, very, very well. And not just paid very well, it's really good to be able to have letters in your portfolio from ministers and from parliament saying, thank you for the good work you've done, or we're giving you this job. Then when you go to the next one, it's like, oh, but this can't, go and call this minister. Fly there if you want, go and have a meeting. They trusted me to get that done. And then building up from there.
That's a good portfolio to have. You know, one question I wanted to ask you before we got deep into that conversation, for those who don't know you, or people may even know you from your businesses and so on, who is Daniel? And that's a deep question, I know, but I want you to take it wherever it goes.
You know what? I've been different as I've gone through the evolution of the different phases of my life, right? I was interviewed by a guy a day or two ago, and he's like, he literally every 10 years sits down since he's been grown up and says, who am I going to be for this next 10 years? For me, circumstances kind of just like, yeah, this is who you're going to need to be to step up to survive this one. So what's it going to be? I was late diagnosed with Asperger's. I was diagnosed at the age of 27 that I'm on the autistic spectrum. So I spent 27 years being autistic and not knowing. So I spent 27 years having challenges around how I operate in the world, how I literally survive in terms of my mental health in the world, how I engage with people, because having Asperger's, I don't have the natural wiring for social interaction. I don't have the wiring for it. I had to train and develop those skills. And so I've always been driven. I was always, I was the first black person on the honors roll of my school. My parents moved to a predominantly white area when I was 10 or 11. And then what ended up happening was that I didn't have a great time of it. But the thing is that my younger sister she's still got friends from that time that she's had for like 30 years or whatever. And I had no one. And it took a time. It took, the time between all of those experiences and being diagnosed underhands, because it wasn't because of them. Was there ignorance? Yeah, but they were mostly kids. They didn't know. If they called you a darkie, it's because that's what they heard their parents saying. They didn't have that hate yet. It was still ignorance. And I know that because there was even one conversation I had with these guys I'd walk to school with sometimes, because we lived in the same area. So we'd walk to school. And I remember there was this one morning, and by this time, I've slept in each of their houses. They've slept in my house. They've eaten my mum's food. And they turned around and they said, like, it was David that spoke, and he looked at Gary and he nodded as if like they said, yeah, we're going to have this conversation now. I'm going to say to him. And David looks and goes, Dan, he goes, I didn't really know any colour people before I knew you, but you know what? Colour people are all right. And he looked at Gary and winked. And then he goes, but I fucking hate Packies though. I was just like, what? What just happened? What? And in that experience, looking back now with grown-up eyes, I see that I had given him the opportunity to look beyond any fear or anything that he'd had of narratives about what coloured people were, right? But there were still groups that they didn't have that opportunity to have an experience with, and so they still were carrying those narratives. And this actually continued. I'm landing so this continued throughout my life. I remember I dated a girl, can't remember how many years ago now, but she was Indian, and I'd gone to pick her up once, and she goes, no, I'm not at home, I'm at my mum's. So the plan was I was just going to park up, she was going to hop in the car, we're going to drive away. Her sneaking out the house didn't work. Her mum caught her sneaking out the house. She's like, oh, who's your friend? Tell them to come inside. Of course, she wasn't expecting that her little well-groomed Indian, and they were Brahmin, so like the highest caste Indian caste. Right? They're not even fraternizing with lower caste Indians. And then all of a sudden, like, I get out of the car and all I see is her mum's face go... And this was interesting because, like, I've got friends from that part of the world, and they love me. I'm the guy, right? But they wouldn't let me marry their sister. But we understand that there's not like, I just get it. This is the thing, right? This is like the culture thing. So I walk through the door now, and her mum's like, "What's going on here? Was my daughter about to get raped?" Like you could see all of the stories going on. Anyway, now we're sitting, and then I start breaking out the Hindi. And she's like, huh? what's this black dude sitting on my sofa speaking to me in my language? But I'm from East London, where there was an opportunity for me to learn certain aspects of the culture and the language. Fast forward 10 minutes, the mum's warmed up now because she's like, well, this is my mind's blown right now. I'm here having a conversation in Hindi with this black guy on my sofa. And then grandma comes down the stairs and nearly falls over. Little Nutty. And I'm like I said, good evening, like, grandma, like, pleasure to meet you. My name's Daniel. And then she's like, Kaise ho? Like, what's going on? Like, there's a black guy in the house. He's speaking to me in Hindi. What's going on? Fast forward an hour and a half, me and Namita nearly didn't get out of the house because grandma and mum are like, yo, don't worry, I can cook. Let's all have food together. Like, I don't want this to end. Like, when are you coming back? Like, this is so great. Like, I mean, you got to like bring him back again and blah, 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 blah. There was a complete paradigm shift that happened because how I showed up in that space created the opportunity for the stories that they had. And this has been an ongoing thing that's happened in my life, right? And it's happened, interestingly, there's been times when the stereotype has been reinforced, unfortunately, in certain unfortunate circumstances in my life. But generally speaking, I've found that Daniel has been someone who has shown up in the space, invited people to look at things differently, and for their world to be changed as a result of that engagement and experience, whether it's through my work, through conversation, through whatever. And that's what I've endeavored to be, to give people the opportunity to disrupt the way they've looked at the world long enough to decide, is this how I want to look at the world and can I look at it differently?
I love that. I love that story. I resonate with your stories in so many different ways. So I grew up with being labeled with ADHD and ADD growing up as a kid, and it had similar treatments. I grew up in a society in the area where my stepdad is Nigerian and I am Black American. And these two cultures did not get along.
No. I was going to say, I know for a fact that hardline Nigerian culture probably doesn't gel with African American culture.
No, it did not get along whatsoever. So depending on how I show up in different spaces would be the treatment. But when both spaces knew that I was from the other culture, I was not fully accepted in the culture. Like, I wasn't Nigerian enough to be.
Do you mind me asking what tribe your stepdad is?
Yoruba.
Oh, okay.
He's from the Yoruba tribe. And so, you know, I was not embraced in either or tribes, either or cultures fully. So I had to navigate that in the world. And and then when I moved out of DC, I met other cultures like Mexican, Filipino. I dated the Puerto Rican for a little bit. My current wife is Chinese, and having to go through that the same experience you went. I went through the family itself.
My wife's Russian, so
so you dad disowned her. Like you're out of the trust. Well, you're out of everything because you have shamed us by. Bringing this person home.
Can I ask you a question off the back of that, not to interject, because this is something that I'd love to get your take on this, because I guested on a podcast a couple of years ago, really great guy, Kyrie. I think you'd actually get along really well. I'd love to introduce you to him. He's a really, really cool guy. Okay. He's got a podcast called the All That Podcast. And when I was on his podcast, I said, you know, if I was born and raised in the States, or at least raised, I don't know if I'd date outside of the Black community. I don't know if I would, because the Black experience in North America is very different to other parts of the world. The nuances of interracial relationships, yes, it differs from city to city, state to state, county to county, but there is an overarching narrative that I find to be very, very interesting. And I've actually found firsthand, even as I do the work now, that when I come into conversations around my work supporting the Black community, people say, but you're not even with a Black woman. Do you find that? I know this is your show and you're supposed to be asking the question.
No, but I love this.
But do you face that pushback as well?
Yes, I faced that pushback as well. And until they get to, you know the woman that I'm with and know, like, the sacrifices that she's been to have taken literally to be with me, and still takes to understand the culture I grew up in and respect it and support me through it all, even when there's a misunderstanding. That level of humanity that she has and the soul that she has, you know, I stand by that, and she stands by me. And I think we have to get away from that narrative that just because, you know, I'm not purely with a black woman, I can't support, uplift, and help move the black culture forward or the African culture forward. Because before I was with this woman and I was with both cultures didn't fully embrace me. Which pushed me away from that narrative. Because I was like, all right, I'm not good enough to be black. I'm African booty scratcher, everything, every name under the sun. I didn't get the proverbial black treatment that I was expecting and embracement. Nigerian culture the same. You're not fully Nigerian. You lazy like them, or you this, you that. You know, oh, look at this black guy trying to be Nigerian, and so that did give me the comfort of saying that, oh, I need to embrace with a, you know, and this is not the black woman's fault or anything. It's just me going through the narrative that there's always going to be a narrative that we put in place mentally, but we have to shift that narrative, right? Just like we going back to the conversation of mindset. Once we shift that narrative and mindset and disruptive, let's see what we can create then after we disrupt that. So here I am with this Chinese woman. We have a beautiful mixed child together, and she's just about black liberation. Just as I told her, she has a black soul, because everything that she loves and she does from her soul is very, very black in the essence. And but she stays true to who she is, and she's true to her culture as well. She's not trying to emulate black culture, but her soul and how she treats people when right and wrong is that very much of a black woman who's embraces her full culture.
I'm with you. Well, thank you for sharing that. I always find that interesting. Like, even like, it's really funny when we walk around Cabo, because my stepdaughter's fully Russian. So you see me walking around with this little blonde-haired white girl, like, what's going on here? Yeah. And then they, like, when we've got the stroller, when my son's in the stroller, they're like, what's going on in the stroller? Like, is he the help? Like, what's going on? Like, especially when you see, like, black groups or black families come down, or even like in the development that where we live. It's like, what's going on here? Like, we don't really get it. And it's just really funny to witness the amount of time and energy that gets spent on these questions when they're real questions that can actually affect real change, that we're not really doing anything about.
And you know what we really have to do in order to really start to create spaces to change these narratives? We got to create more brave spaces, because we focus so much on safe spaces, but safe spaces allow for white supremacy. It allows for the othering of others. But if you create brave spaces full of vulnerability, curiosity, there's another key aspect where we get to learn about each other, our cultures, what makes us tick, notions of time, things of that nature. It allows for space to have, even if we disagree, uncomfortable conversations that moves us forward in understanding each other from a human standpoint of view. But as soon as you other somebody is when you can start to look at them as the other, or then eventually, you know, in some societies and cultures where you're not even looked at as human anymore, you're looked at as something less than human. And then that doesn't warrant me to have to understand you or have a conversation with you because you're below me.
It's like, okay, you just kind of signed me off of this conversation. I'm going to leave you over there. I'm going to be over here.
There. Me and my wife had some tough moments during Black Lives Matter, because I don't think some of the things that we were seeing that were showing up in our lives that were really ugly. For example, my daughter experiencing racism and us having to navigate that conversation together from our different lens that we see and work through that. And then also it rearing, even though after I shattered the stereotypes in her family, you know, the conversation that came up from people who love me but said something that was very hurtful, and I had to like address that and help them understand why that was wrong. These were some difficult things, and you know, I have to create a space where they're able to receive the information without being defensive. And you see white fragility show up even in Asian spaces or Latino spaces, or even in Black people, because there's some Black people that have a strive to a level of whiteness too that, shakes them. So it's very difficult to navigate and be vulnerable in at the same time. But each time that I allowed myself to be vulnerable, it made me stronger and made me more adaptable, made me resilient, and be able to further the conversation and dialogue and stand in my truth and my power. And whereas where I sit now with understanding what is power, right? How do we hold power? How do we wield power? And where does true power lie, right? And we put too much power in the things that we should necessarily not put all our power into. That's the new conversation I've been having with myself. I don't know if you ever had that conversation with yourself.
I have, and there's another conversation that kind of dovetails on the one that you said, and it's one that I think is actually even evidence in your own experiences. We've got these things about white culture and Black culture and Asian culture, but if we actually step into quote unquote Black culture, we'll see that there are pockets within. There is no singular Black culture. If we go to white culture, there are pockets. If we go into Asian, there are pockets, and even within that, there are subdivisions. So, for example, I'm not accepted by a lot of my Black British communities as being Black enough because of how I speak. I speak with Queen's English. I don't speak more slang or colloquial, but that's because my parents raised me to speak Queen's English. I think sometimes also we mix up cultural divides with economic divides, which has ended up being the divide by virtue of the fact that there has been, especially in places like North America, a suppression of certain groups into economic pockets. And so there becomes this association. So those that seek to move beyond the economic pocket are then told that they no longer hold that cultural classification, even though it's not that they've broken free of that cultural classification, they're broken free of that economic grouping. And as a result, now operating differently. But we say, look at him. He thinks he's white because he dresses a certain way or he talks a certain way. Well, no, he just dresses and talks a certain way.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with all that. And then the question becomes, why do we put so much power into these power dynamics and structures? How do we begin to change where we place power, how we give power, and move the power dynamics to that of a collective versus, these systems or these things or these attributes that have been set in play?
I don't even think that we give the power. We haven't done anything to disrupt the ongoing narrative of that power being where it sits. I mean, look, we're talking about North America. The institutions that are in place now have been slowly broken down to a point over the last few hundred years that America's been a country. But by and large, for the majority of time, it has existed. For hundreds of years, there was enslavement. Women were given some semblance of inclusion as full adults who were able to actually make decisions for themselves. Civil rights was in the 60s, which means that the people who are setting the playing field right now were raised by people that refused to accept that people of color were even human. So there may be some catch-up time for those systems to continue to break down and create space for new systems. But if we're not consciously contributing to the creation of new systems, there's not going to be anything other than confusion, which is going to allow those who are practiced in dominating to continue to dominate, even if they do it through a different form and through different means. So alongside the dissolution of existing systems, there must be a commitment to moving intentionally towards new systems that are inclusive and that do recognize that as humans, we are humans, and we can do as much dividing as we want between you're this and you're that. Ultimately, we all bleed red. We all have a beating heart. We all have brainwaves. We're all human. Yes, there may be certain DNA-based differences that mean that our melanation levels are different. But all of these other narratives of separation are cultural, not genetic.
Yeah.
They're ideas, not truths. They're just realities, idea-driven realities. And once we start moving beyond these narratives and consciously moving towards narratives that actually support what we want to move forward, it may be a generation, it may be two. It may not be our children, it may be our children's children. But overall, humanity as a whole, which is the sum total of the humans that make it up, will start living a more glorious existence, I believe.
Yeah, and that's what I believe for me scared me and woke me, my daughter experiencing that. And I just knew that I wanted to go full steam ahead of creating a base, or at least a foundation in my lifetime of disrupting the narrative and creating a base where, when you pass off the baton for the next generation, they start at a different base to reimagine, reconfigure, reconstruct what that system should be or what it could look like. By doing this podcast and all the other things that I'm involved with, it's allowing space for a different paradigm shift for us to look at. Maybe instead of bandaging up this system, maybe we need to create a new system, one that brings everybody to the table and we all can co-create together. That's really for us and by us, right? Instead of there being a power dynamic of there's this one set group that, whether they be elite, whether they be white, whatever it has, that holds all the power, creates the rules, sets the standards. And in order for you to make it, you have to abide, to play by these rules.
And you know what? Ultimately, I think you kind of, touched on something that I believe to be true. It's not a black thing or a white thing. It's a gray thing, right? And it's just the aged idea that smaller groups have a right to control the destiny of others. A smaller group have the right to live off of the lifeblood of others, because ultimately, once you get to a certain level, it's not about the color of skin at all. It's just about power.
No. Once you get to a certain level, it's definitely not about the color of your skin anymore. There's a certain group at play there, in that once you get to that level, the color may matter at the lower level, but once you get to a certain level, that doesn't matter. And so I'm making two plays here. I'm making a play on the economics, uplifting the bottom cultures around the world that just happen to be of black and brown people. But I specifically going with black just because these are the two worlds that I grow in. I know there's a miscommunication, and I see the biggest opportunity there if we work in collaboration, cooperation. And I believe as a whole, a majority of our ancestors and the heart and the true essence of our people were loving people. Or else you probably would see a lot more happening in 2020 with these riots. It'd be more retaliation than just equal treatment. And I believe that to be true. And once we can, shift the power economics to where we can create for ourselves, maybe then we can come to the table and have a mutual agreement. Okay, all right, let's talk how we can co-create together. Because now you have to respect me now, because now I'm coming to the table with my own. So I don't need any of yours. I have my own. So how can we negotiate then? You got your own, I got my own. How can we negotiate and create
two
something
people
for
from
us?
a position of power, not one having an upper hand on the other? And
Exactly.
from that place.
Because I feel we've been operating at the position of less power, so we have nothing to negotiate with, right? It's more of like we're begging for a seat at times. And it doesn't even have to be about the money part. It could just be the mindset part. When as soon as we believe that we are enough, and systems that say that we're not enough, and we start to reshift the narrative that we have to play by those rules in a system that was never built for us, then that's when the true work begins.
And again, coming back to what we were speaking earlier, it doesn't matter if a system wasn't built for you. We don't have that excuse anymore. We have globalization, right? We've got virtual operation.
Yeah, and that's taught us that even more now in 2020. The things that I've been able to do virtually that I've held off for so long because I didn't think I had the tools or resources. Oh man, how I don't know what your spiritual belief is, but as soon as the thought became prevalent and then I acted on it, God, the Mother Earth, the divine, it just found a way. And resources just started showing up as I needed them, and it got me to the next step. And like Jay-Z said in one of his songs, this spiritual shit really works.
The t-shirt.
What does that mean? Do you even spiritualize? So for ladies and gentlemen who can't,
there's supposed to be a question mark here. So this was a sample before we put the one on the site on my store now has got a question mark. Like, do you even spiritual, bro? Like, can we even have this conversation? Like, are you even on that level? So it's a joke line.
Yeah, okay, I like it. So for those who are just listening to the audio experience, he has this t-shirt on that says, "Do you even spiritual?" The question mark is not there, but I get it now. I get it.
Yeah. The actual store's got the question mark one. We got it. It's like, yeah, it needs a question mark. So I always get the sample of the teas first when we get the new slogans. Whenever I hear cool ones, we just add them to the store, and then I get them. I get them shit down.
So Man, we went so off track, but I love the conversation that we had. So let's get back into the lesson of your journey of how you got here. And yeah, I'm really curious as to how this episode is going to come out, just because we really. I want to apologize to my engineer in advance. Thank you so much for always making me look good, making me sound good. And hopefully we can make this look smooth and beautiful. And it doesn't follow our normal flow, but I'm pretty sure the information, people are going to love the conversation. So speaking of your career, what do you think the future has in store for your industry when you take a look at what you've been able to do in your career and even the restart?
Too many jokers, man.
Too many jokers.
Yeah. I did a post on my Instagram that was a tweet that I did a long time ago. It's like, everyone out here wants to be a coach, but they don't want to do the work. Everybody, I'm a coach, I'm a healer. Really? You had one ayahuasca trip? Like, chill, chill. And this isn't saying that we don't all have something to contribute, but let's contribute. We don't need to, I don't need to say that I'm a king and wear a plastic crown in order to lead people to greatness. I can just show up and lead people to greatness. I don't need to make claims. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like, I'm a coach. No, you're on the couch. Like you haven't been in the gym. And I know there are a lot of people that are bitter about people coming, especially people that are coming in and making bank, like they're getting the bag. They come in and they've got the right funnel, whatever, they get their niche or whatever. I'm not even really talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that when you are putting yourself into a field of service, such as what we're doing with this work, and you're just here to get the bag and you're not actually honoring that position, every time that you take, you get that credit card payment from someone and they're trusting you, you're actually feeding into any narratives that they're going to have from this point forward about the people that do this work. And there are people who are denying themselves real change and transformation, denying themselves the opportunity to heal and move forward because they've been burnt by these people. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So I'm very much, and again, this isn't about someone having a certain experience or having a certain qualification, although in some instances I think qualifications are called for. I put it on my paperwork. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. If you've got certain challenges, you need to disclose so that we can make sure that you can get the right support. That's not my role. Especially when there's sexy modalities. For example, my wife was learning to be a human design analyst before she got pregnant. She's got to do a few more bits, but she spent years learning this craft. You've got people doing research on YouTube and saying, I'm a human design thing, pay me X, Y, Z, I'm going to do your human design reading. That's a joke. You don't know what you're doing. And if you do, then honor and respect the thing by going and getting the qualifications,
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a thing for that, because I think certain things, especially things that someone's put their back into actually developing and building out, respect it, respect the work and be ready to do the work, because you will be challenged.
Yeah. And I love that you said do the work. So I'm not a leadership coach that's open to the public, but in my government role and jobs that I do that people are close to me, that leaders around me, we often co-coach each other, right? I've been through this urban leadership program where I first started doing the deep work in my leadership, like healing the wounds as a wounded leader that shows up and confronting what those wounds are, because if you don't, that shows up in the work you do in every essence, right? 100%. And so not to say that you're going to rid of all your wounds, but you have to do the work to be aware of them so you know how you show up in the work that you do. And that's the most important part. This is how you know when you have somebody who's a real coach, when they're able to, in a vulnerable, respectful, transparent way, tell you that you need to do work and are able to share with you the work that they did to get to where they did.
And continue to do. This isn't about being perfect. I mean, for one of my programs, we do a couple of group calls a week, and I'm not on here everything's angel fairies and dust and light and the sunbeams and rainbows came out of my butthole this morning. No, we're all up against it. That's life. That is life. But showing up every day to do that, sharing real stories. And does it backfire sometimes? Yeah. I've had people say, well, you haven't How can you teach me when you haven't got all your life together? Nobody's got their life together, bro.
No.
But sometimes through the experience and the ability that we have to share the lessons of what we've gone through, we can empower you. Just as, like I said, I spent 6 figures last year on my personal development. That wasn't $5 courses on Instagram. That's real-ish that continues to go on. I've always got a leading coach or like a leading deep work practice that I'm into because I'm continuing to grow, continuing to heal. Because at the end of the day, if we'd stepped into perfection, we'd transcended into angel beings of light and gone off into the ethers. So I'm still here in physical form, which means there's still some shit to clean up. And it's going to be there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep working on that.
Yeah, and I consider myself a lifelong learner. So for those of you who listen, that was a gem dropper right there. If you want to grow in your life, career, whatever it is that you want exponential growth on, the greatest investment you can do is on yourself, your professional development, healing, counseling, mentorship, whatever it is. Invest in you. That's what's going to catapult you to the next level. So I love that you said that. So what projects are you currently working on and where can people find you?
Best place to find me is always my website, dreamwithdan.com. Easy to remember. My podcast is on there, books. We're getting back to doing more regular virtual events now that Ethan's kind of settling in. I'm going to get back to sort of scheduling more stuff in. So those will be on the events tab. A lot of it's free. I've got a free resources page. My blog 3-4 times a week. But dreamwithdan.com is where to find everything at the moment. Really, I've got something that I'm cooking right now.
Could Risepreneurs be a part of this? Come on.
We can talk about that. Yes,
you see, I'm trying to work with you guys. I didn't pre-warn them or anything, but I'm gonna drop all the links in so you can find them. But I have a feeling I can't let this man go without us trying to work something together for both of our listeners.
I'm all about collaboration. I definitely want to get you on the Do It Dan podcast as well to share your story. We've got to get that hooked up.
Thank you.
But ultimately, virtual. So last year I had to cancel like 4 or 5 retreats. I do retreats all over the world, very intimate, 6-7 people. That's it. We go to really cool places, like hiring a villa just outside Tuscany in the Tuscan hills. We get a chef, we get like wine brought in, we sit and we break it down and we cook it up. We've been to Malta, we've been to Mount Shak, we've been to really cool places, but we had to keep canceling because of this stuff.
COVID, yeah.
So just making everything predictably virtual.
Okay.
So just converting everything into like so setting up like a clean virtual stage and creating like replicating the space as much as we can to do more in-depth virtual stuff. So that's really where we're going. Got a couple of things. I'm in a book with Jack Canfield this year, which I'm really excited about. My interview by him is going live any time now. So just like, thank you. Just getting a couple more of those bits done. I've just done a re-edit of my book, Stepping Beyond Intention. We're releasing that with a new book cover. That's happening now. And I'm working on my 5th book called Stop Meditating for release later this year.
All right. Congratulations. You're doing big things. And I plan to join you in that space as well soon in the next year or so.
100%.
So definitely about time this episode drops, the book will be out. I'll try to make sure I get all the links from you so folks listening to this can grab the book. Dream with Dan, thank you so much for being here today. Your knowledge, your wisdom. I feel like you're my long lost brother now. We had a kinfolk conversation.
We've got to keep it going.
Got to keep it going. And we're going to work on something together. I don't know what that is, but I'm putting that out in the universe right now. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Risepreneurs. Any last words of wisdom for the people?
Don't edify anyone any higher than yourself. Like, edify yourself first. You know, like, I've been in Wall Street Journal and Forbes and all this kind of stuff, and oh my God, and blah blah blah. I'm just a human. I've not achieved anything that any of our listeners can't achieve. I just set the intention and went for it. Right? I've got another thing: dream and go get it. I went to go and get it, and I'm only able to go as far as I see myself able to go, regardless of how many other people edify me or lift me up. And so, edify yourself first, to yourself. It doesn't have to be to others, just to yourself and within yourself. And then the edification from others will be the happy byproduct of that. Like, lift yourself up vulnerably, honestly, with integrity and authenticity, and very intentionally.
That's beautiful. Dana, man, you are the man, and we thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Rise Urban Nation.
Thank you for taking the journey.
Be sure to like, comment, and smash that subscribe button. And stay connected with Terrell on and off the show. Follow at Rise Urban Nation on all platforms.
Do what you love what you do. Don't chase the money. Let the money chase you.